chilly Sunday morning, I bid you welcome as we come together to worship God with one another and to pour out the joy that is in our hearts back to the one who created and redeemed us all. So as we begin our worship today, I invite you to take a moment to still the busyness of the world, to let go of any concerns and cares that you may have carried into this place with you, and to rest now for a moment in the stillness of God, a God who exists outside of time, outside of our small-minded busyness, and who is inviting each and every one of us eternally to come home. So with this thought of stillness in our hearts, we begin our worship through the music of our choir's choral call to worship. I invite you to rise now and join me in this morning's call to worship, which you'll find printed in your bulletin. Happy are those who walk in God's ways. Faithful are those whose eyes are fixed on righteousness. So come, let us love the Lord our God. I invite you now to remain standing and join in the singing of our first hymn, I Sing the Almighty Power of God.
Thank
Holy Spirit, guide us as we walk in faith, and guard us against the powers that would draw us away from your ways. Help us live according to your commandments, that we might live long in the land that you have prepared for us. Prompt us to seek you with our whole heart, and guide us to walk in your ways, that we may carry out the vows of the covenant we share. May our words and our deeds bring life and faith to others, as we hold fast to the gift of faith. Be near us each and every day, and bless us with your light, that our days may be filled with grace. Amen. At this time, are there any announcements for the good of the congregation?
I have two, I guess.
Go ahead.
Two fundraising opportunities for everyone. Thank you so much. Many people have already donated to both of these. But the first thing I wanted to point out is that the Sunday school youth are collecting after the service again this morning for Rise Against Hunger, which helps people in need across the world. And then the other is if anyone would still like to donate to the Read Across America fundraiser that I'm doing on behalf of my preschool students in Trenton. So see any of the youth or myself after the service.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. Are there others? All right, several from here at the church. Immediately following worship, our three boards will have their reorganizational meetings. So members of the deacons, I'll have you head into Thelma Mount. Members of the trustees, I'll have you head into the young men's room. And Donna, where would you like to? Members of the Board of Christian Ed, please meet in the Sunday school group. So please disperse yourselves after our meeting. As this is the third Sunday of the month, we will be making our monthly trip to the Allaire home. So if you're at all interested in joining us for that, that service begins at 2 o'clock at the Allaire home out on Dutch Lane. Tomorrow for President's Day, our office is closed. Colleen has the day off. So if you need to get a hold of me, please contact me directly on my phone. And also, by the end of this week, by Friday, the 21st, Colleen has asked that anyone who has information for the March issue of the Caller, please have that in by this Friday. And looking forward to next week, next Wednesday, 1 week from this week, will be Ash Wednesday. So we'll be having an Ash Wednesday service here at the church to mark the beginning of our Lenten season. So that will be Wednesday, February 26th, here at 7 p.m. So all are invited to join us for that. Are there any other announcements at this time? In that case, I invite all of our young people to come forward. So I know you guys were in Sunday school last week, so you didn't hear the story I told at the beginning of my sermon. But the story I told at the beginning of my sermon was the last time I almost got into a fight with my brother. And it wasn't a very good story, and I'm not looking particularly good at it. But I wanted to ask you guys, when was the last time someone made you really angry? You remember? No? What about you guys? Yeah, teenagers have a better self-developed sense of injustice. But recently, has it happened in the last week? Okay. How about you guys? Have you been angry in the last week? Maybe. I wish I wasn't angry last week. There have been plenty of things that make me angry. Sometimes just the simple act of driving my car on the highway makes me angry. But what happens when we are angry? I know you all have been angry. What are we supposed to do? We're supposed to yell at people? No. Are we supposed to hit them? No. Okay. Quick answer? No. The answer is no. But what are we supposed to do when we're upset with people? Any ideas? You guys want to give me a hand? Try and calm yourself down. That's a good start. But what are we supposed to do with the person who makes us angry? Yeah, you're supposed to talk to them. And one of the other things that we're supposed to do is we're supposed to forgive them. And the adults are going to be hearing a sermon about forgiveness today because that's what comes up in our reading of the Bible. But forgiveness is really important, and a lot of times in church we talk about forgiveness. We have this special prayer called the Lord's Prayer. Do you guys know that one yet? It starts, Our Father who art in heaven. You've heard that one, yeah. And there's a part in there that says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So debts are like people, are like money that you owe people, and debtors are the people that you would owe that money to. But the prayer teaches us that we forgive other people like we forgive others. So we basically treat other people the way we would want to be treated, and that we hope they will treat us in the same fashion. So when you get angry, when you get upset with someone, we're not supposed to yell at them, we're not supposed to hit them. We're supposed to forgive them for making us angry, because that's what we would want them to do if we were the ones that made them angry. Does that make sense? Okay. So you guys are dismissed to go to Sunday school because you'll hear more about forgiveness there. But it's an important topic for all of us because, like I said, I get angry when I'm driving on the highway sometimes, and I can't ask forgiveness of the people I say angry things about or shake my fist at when I'm driving by. But it's something that Christians are taught to do in the world. So as you are in Sunday school this week, I invite you guys to think about all of the ways that you are capable of offering forgiveness to others. Okay? All right, I'll see you guys next week. In our Bible study this week, we were talking about the various ways that Christians have gathered over time. We were talking specifically about monastic communities where monks and nuns lived together and the contributions they had to the life of our faith. And one of the things that we teased out of that is that living together is a way of living out our faith with one another. So, in carrying on from our lesson for our children, one of the best ways to go about forgiving people is to not let division arise in the first place, which is one of the reasons that Christians for years and years have greeted each other with the sign of peace. So I invite you now to rise and to greet your neighbor with the sign of Christian peace. Continue in our service, folks. We turn once again to our readings from letters from the Birmingham jail. I'm actually going to shorten this reading, and I'll trust you to take care of the reading that's on the second page. There's a longer section. It's definitely worth casting your mind to. But as we come to this section, we continue the themes that Dr. King was pointing us to last week, where he talked about the need to care for each other in the ways that they need to be cared for. So he continues his theme by saying, society must protect the robbed and punish the robber. I had also hoped that the white moderate would reject the myth concerning time in relation to the struggle for freedom. I have just received a letter from a white brother in Texas. He writes, all Christians know that colored people will receive equal rights eventually. But it is possible that you are in too great a religious hurry. It has taken Christianity almost 2,000 years to accomplish what it has. The teachings of Christ take time to come to earth. Now, such an attitude stems from a tragic misconception of time, from the strangely irrational notion that there is something in the very flow of time that will inevitably cure all ills. Actually, time itself is neutral. It can be used either destructively or constructively. More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless effort of men willing to be co-workers with God. Without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative song of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity. So I invite you to continue reading Dr. King's words on your own, but as we ponder these words for the past few weeks, let us remember that King is seeking to apply his Christian teachings to the present ills of his age. He has been faced with people who tell him that time is not on his side, that Christ's teachings will be brought to earth in time with seemingly no effort from Christians then and there. So we, in 2020, are called to ask ourselves, what are the issues of our time that demand our faith in response? Where are we called to be, as he says, God's co-workers for justice? Ponder these thoughts in your heart as we turn now to our God in prayer. And before we can ponder the response of Christians in justice to a world sorely in need of our witness, we must attend to the concerns and celebrations of our own hearts, ensuring that we are adequately prepared to meet the world with justice and with love and with compassion. So in that spirit, are there concerns or celebrations to be lifted up amongst this congregation today, to be shared before God, and to be borne by your fellow Christians? Anthony. Pass that on to everyone on your behalf. So folks, if Nancy Coleman is not speaking to you today, it has nothing to do with things you have done or said. Her left vocal cord is paralyzed, so she's going in for a procedure on the 26th. So please keep her in your prayers. Don.
Our friend Les came through with surgery. It was a triple bypass, and the family wants to thank everyone for their prayers.
Wonderful. Prayers of thanksgiving for Les's successful triple bypass. Yes. Okay. Karina's husband had shoulder surgery on Friday, so prayers for his recovery. Others. All right. Well, I would ask for traveling mercies for my sister. She's actually up visiting this weekend to go to a friend's wedding, so I had a chance to sit with her for a little while yesterday and catch up. But prayers for her safe return to North Carolina tomorrow, and also for the imminent completion of her thesis. She has a defense date of March 23rd, so fingers crossed that this will be the end of a very long educational journey for her. Are there any others? Then let us hold these concerns and celebrations close as we turn turn to God in prayer. Holy One, we have gathered as your people this morning. We have come to this congregation to be supported by one another. We have come so that you might teach us your ways and lead us in your paths and guide us on our collective journey. We pray that you will speak to us your words of life, for you offer us direction and wholeness when we hear your voice and when we choose to follow. You bless us with your love, you shower us with your grace, and you help us to grow in faith. We seek you, O God, with all our hearts and pray that you are near to us as we turn to you in silence. Loving God, send your Spirit upon us and light our path, that we may travel the road you have prepared for us. We, your people, have heard your word, spoken from pulpit and pew and crossroad alike. So we pray that you enable our hearts and our minds to more fully understand the depths, the wideness of your goodness and your grace. Help us to break free from ideas that no longer bring life, so that we may embrace your life-giving work, your good news offered to all. Challenge us to forsake the paths that ask little of us, and help us to resist the evils and temptations of the world, that we may instead truly follow the ways of your kingdom. Remind us, loving God, that we are always your children, that we are never strayed too far from your sight, that we always have much to learn. Help us to seek you each and every day, to acknowledge that we need your wisdom and your guidance, and help us to return to the path and walk alongside you again. We ask this in the name of Jesus, who is our guide and companion on this journey of faith, who called us to follow your way, and who taught us to pray with one another, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Friends, God has given us growth. God has guided our that lead to life and provided companions for that journey. Our very lives we understand as a gift from God. So with gratitude and praise, we turn to God with obedient hearts to offer back some of our gifts, that through them others might find life and wholeness. I invite the ushers to come forward and collect this morning's offering. That they may be used in ministry and mission to bring glory to you, our Creator, Sustainer, and Redeemer. Amen. I invite you now to remain standing and join in the singing of our second hymn, God is Calling Through the Whisper.
Calling through the whisper.
first lesson this morning comes from the book of Deuteronomy, starting in the 30th chapter. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And our New Testament lesson continues immediately from where we left off last week, the continuation of the Sermon on the Mount found in Matthew chapter 5. You have heard it that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on your way to the court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go to hell. Here ends the reading from God's word. May God bless and magnify it to our use.
Everybody
first time I preached on the text from Matthew that we heard this morning, I had a really profound experience. I was a young chaplain. I was working at the VA hospital in Memphis, and I was preaching on this text. And I was preaching on the bits about anger that we see in there, and the power that anger has over our lives. How it changes the way we see, how it changes the way we act, and how it colors the way we deal with one another. And in that time, in that place, I had a lot of experience in dealing with anger. I saw the folks that I worked with in the substance abuse units turning that anger on themselves. There's this vicious cycle that takes place with substance abuse. People know they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They feel guilty and angry and ashamed, and in order to confront that, they take more of the substances that they know are bad for them, and they get this nasty spiral going. And oftentimes they reach out to other people in anger. I saw the frustration and the rage that afflicted the people who lived in the psych unit downstairs, whose lives were completely out of their control due to their psychological illnesses, and who raged against the visions that they had, the injustices of their lives, and their perceptions of their treatment there. I also worked very closely with the folks in the PTSD unit. There's a different cycle of anger that goes on there. Oftentimes it's rooted in a reaction to whatever instance provoked the PTSD in the first place. Anger at the people that put them in those situations. Anger at themselves for failing to be strong enough to not be bothered by these things. Anger at themselves. Anger at their family. Anger at the world at large. So in those days and in that place, I was used to thinking and talking about anger. So after my sermon, we celebrated communion, and a young man came forward to receive communion. But instead of taking it after he had dipped the host in the chalice, he wrapped it up in a handkerchief and said, "I need to go get right with someone." He had truly heard those words from Matthew's gospel. If you know that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift on the altar and go and be reconciled with them. Now that story has stuck with me. It's been almost a decade since I gave that sermon. And it's stuck with me. It still lives in my mind and my imagination. It's one of the few times I got to see an immediate direct reaction to my preaching. He put those words and that gospel to use immediately. But that's the end of the story for me and him. I don't know what came next. I don't know who he needed to get right with, or why, or what happened. But I wonder. This past week, I had lunch with the pastor of the AME church out on Waterworks Road. And they're going through a time of institutional rebalancing. Ron's been there for about 7 years now. He's got a couple new initiatives that he's leading the church through. And as a guide for navigating these challenging new projects, he has implemented a discipline with them called the 5 Whys. And it's basically a way of asking yourself about what it is that you're doing. If you find yourself undertaking any given action, you ask yourself why. And when you find out the answer to that question, you ask a question about the answer you got. If I said, I'm going to donate $50 to the church, why are you donating $50? Well, I'm donating $50 because I believe in this. Why do you believe in that? Keep asking and asking and asking to the 5th iteration of that, and get, hopefully, to the heart of what is motivating you to do something or to not do something. Now, this is a new version of something that is a very old tradition within the church. Ignatius Loyola, who was the founder of the Jesuit order, started a practice called the examen. And it basically asked you to pray in this same fashion as these 5 whys. Loyola had been a military man, and he was injured by a cannonball, broke his leg terribly, and he received the best medical care that the 1500s had to offer which was, not great. So he was confined to his bed for a while. His leg was cast and then broken and rebroken, hoping that they could fix the deformity caused by the cannonball. And while he was pondering the damages that had been done to his body, the long road of recovery, the ending of his military career, he had plenty of time to consider exactly what he had been doing, to consider why he had been doing it. And it's that type of reflection I want us to consider this week. Last week we heard from the section that immediately precedes this part of the Gospel of Matthew. We heard about letting our light shine, about being the salt of the earth, about being a city on a hill. And in our lesson from Isaiah, we heard about removing the yoke from amongst ourselves, the pointing of finger and the speaking of evil. We talked about all of the ways that we are called to help build God's kingdom by caring for others in the same way that God cares for us. But what can those 5 whys, what can they examine? What can that teach us about why we are doing these things? Are we caring for others, building God's kingdom, only to avoid punishment? If so, that's kind of an understandable reaction. We kind of get that, because whenever the prophets, like Isaiah, are speaking about God's judgment and about God's punishment, it always seems to come back to the ills within society, about the way society members were treating one another, or about their adoption of foreign gods. The prophets point their finger to where folks had gone off track, and it almost always came back to the way they treated each other. And we can see that attitude echoed in our section from Jesus this morning. That notion of punishment as a motivator for good action. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, "You fool," you will be liable to the hell of fire. Jesus focuses our attention on our personal liability and tells us that that road may lead to us being thrown into jail and never getting out until the last penny is paid. But I want us to consider this morning, what if that is not a prediction, a roadmap, a series of events? What if instead it's a warning? What if, like last week, it is a reminder that there is a cost to our actions? What if it is there to remind us that we are not being called to change our ways solely for the benefit of ourselves or to make society a better place? But what if we're being called to do these things to free ourselves as well? Jesus tells us that if we do not forgive, we are the ones who will be in prison. Whether a prison of stone, as we hear in this text, but perhaps prisons of our own making as well. I worked with too many people who were living in prisons of their own making in the hospital. I told you about that cycle of substance abuse, about people not being able to deal with their shame, knowing that they should do better, and dealing with that by taking more of the substances they knew were destroying them. They lived in prisons that they were making. In the PTSD unit, we often told the people going through this treatment that anger was a secondary emotion. It was there as a reasonable reaction to the fact that their boundaries had been violated. We told them the words of the writer Anne Lamott: not forgiving someone is like drinking rat poison and expecting the rat to die. And that gets at the heart of it. When we're angry with others, we live as though they should die because of the hurt we bear. We live as though we have not forgiven them. We live as though maybe we ourselves have not been forgiven. When we can't forgive others, it's often because we do not believe it about ourselves. I worked with one young man in the PTSD unit, and his trauma stemmed from the fact, I think I've actually told this story before, stemmed from the fact that while he was deployed in Iraq, he was forced to shoot a child who was a suicide bomber. He had to bear that weight. And he knew it was the right thing to do. Saved his life, saved the life of other guys in his platoon. But still, he killed that child. He killed a child that didn't know how the world worked, who had been co-opted into this practice by a hateful person. But at the heart of that, he knew all the answers. But he couldn't forgive the fact that he had pulled that trigger. He couldn't forgive the fact that he was guilty of killing a child. He was living in a prison of his own making. And I wonder if his inability to forgive himself manifested in other ways in his life. I knew that he had trouble forgiving others. He had trouble forgiving the people that had put him in that position. He had trouble forgiving the people who put the grenades in the child's hand in the first place. But he had trouble forgiving his commanding officers who sent him out on patrol that day. When he returned, he had problems forgiving people who inconvenienced his life. Anyone who got in his way, he held them all to the same rigid standard. The same rigid standard he held himself to. And I wonder where he would have been if he had heard those words that we heard from Isaiah last week. Is this not the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Last week we talked about our role in building that reality for others. But what if we are the ones that need to go free? What if we are the oppressed? What if we are the ones who cannot feel forgiven? Or to put it in the words of the reading from Deuteronomy today, what if we are the ones who are in need of the chance to choose life? Now, we can read this section from Deuteronomy in the same vein that we read our text last week, about how we treat others in society. And that's almost never a wrong way to read the Old Testament. But sometimes it's right to read this about us, about you and me, as though we are the ones who need to be released, as though we are the ones who need to choose life. This chunk of the Old Testament is in fact written by people who needed that gospel brought to them. The book of Deuteronomy was written by a group called the Deuteronomists. Amazing names, I know. But Deuteronomy means second law. The people who wrote the book of Deuteronomy fled the fall of the northern kingdom and came to the south. And they brought the wisdom that they had learned by watching their kingdom crumble around them to their brothers and sisters in Jerusalem. In addition to Deuteronomy, they wrote the books of Joshua and Judges and Samuel and Kings. They were people who were looking to understand what had happened. They were people who stood in need of God's protection and care. So for them, choosing life was a very specific choice. They knew the consequences of choosing death, how wide-ranging those things had been, and they had seen their kingdom brought down around their ears. They fled to the south, and they knew that they needed to choose life. They knew that they needed to understand how God cared for them in new ways. They knew that they needed to claim the life that God had offered each one of them. And they made rules, they made grand rules about how we treat each other, about how we venerate God in society, about what type of foods to eat and what type of clothing to wear. And they sought to choose life through legislation. And so when we hear Jesus carrying forth this tradition. We hear echoes of that same legislation. If I say to you that you are if you are angry with a brother or sister, you'll be liable to judgment. If you insult a brother or sister, you'll be liable to the council. If you say you fool, you'll be liable to the hell of fire. That notion of liability, from those who murder, who are liable to judgment, to those who murder the spirit of others. It's a through line. But that is not the only thing that Jesus teaches us. Jesus teaches us that God comes to care for those who remain in need. God comes to offer them the chance to choose life. So what if that means you and me? What if that means that in each instance we are being called to choose life? Not in order to avoid our liability, not in order to avoid punishment, but so that we may truly live. What if we view God's kingdom not as something we build for others, but something we usher in for our own sakes? What if we view it as a chance for us to choose life for us? What if we consider this as a chance to let go of the things that are choosing death? Think about those words at the end of Jesus' readings. He's talking about adultery, but hear these words. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. What if when we choose life, we lop off the limbs of our grudges? We pluck out the eye of injustice. We let cool the righteous anger we hold when our boundaries have been violated. We are God's people. We have received God's grace, a grace which saves us. But what does it save us for? We know that it does save us to offer that grace to others. But perhaps, just perhaps, it saves us so that we can choose life each and every day. Amen. Our final hymn this morning is a hymn of renunciation, of letting go. Give to the winds thy fears. So please rise as you're able and join in the singing. deacons to Thelma Mount, trustees to the young men's room, and teachers to the Sunday school room for your meetings. And as we depart, friends, may you go forth to walk in God's ways. May you hold fast to God in all that you do. May the love of God be yours, and may God's blessings rest upon all of us together. Amen.